And welcome back. Well, imagine you're pregnant with your first child. You have 2 deaths in the family, and your husband is diagnosed with cancer. Sounds like a novel, right? Well, it was real life for a Lake Geneva woman, but it was a wake-up call to do what she loved.
Yeah, Tamera Lyon is a mother, author, and wife. Her husband survived cancer and went on to become a doctor, which I think is amazing. She's now the author of this book, Cain's Justice, and this is not her first one either. We'll talk more about some of those other books. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I think it's always great to understand an author's story a little bit more, and then you like their work so much better. But you went through some real ups and downs in your 20s.
I totally did.
Take us through that. It was kind of like 6 months, right, of extraordinary life events.
6 months of a roller coaster ride. Yeah, the journey to my becoming an author didn't really start with me just picking up a pen and paper and going for it. Back when I was 24, in the year 2000, I went through a 6-month period of highs and lows and kind of experienced a roller coaster, the circle of life on a heightened level. In March, my first nephew was born, March 2nd. 2 weeks after that, my great aunt died. April 2nd, I had my first and only child, Andy, and shortly, which is a great experience to go through, but still stressful. I was 24. I was kind of a young mom, and a lot of my other friends weren't even married yet. And here I had been married for 3 years and been the breadwinner, and I had Andy. A few weeks after that, in May, my husband graduates from Marquette University right here in Milwaukee with a master's degree in physician assistant studies. He starts a new job in the Lake Geneva area, working as a PA in the emergency room. And I left my job at CompuWare Corporation to stay home, and I thought, this is great, I can focus on being a mom. In June, shortly after my husband started working, his mother, Linda, my mother-in-law, who had advanced diabetes at this point, she'd actually went through a double transplant when Chris and I were first married, kidney, pancreas. That had failed, and her health just started declining rapidly. She ended up in the hospital. And my husband and I kept vigil by her side for a few weeks with other family members, and she fell into a coma and one thing after another, and we were all there when they took her off of life support. So after this, 2 weeks after this happened, in July, she passed away. My brother gets married. Celebration. So here we go again. Up and down. And then after the wedding was over, I'm like, phew, we can finally settle down and maybe enjoy being parents and start thinking about looking for a house, because we still lived in Milwaukee, so my husband was commuting an hour back and forth every day, which is difficult. And then what happened in August, my husband started to not feel well. He had stomach problems, and at first he thought it was an ulcer because we had been through so much stress. And he's like, oh, you know, I'll draw my own blood at work. This is my husband, the medical professional who thinks it's cool to draw his own blood. He also took off a mole in the mirror one time. It was pretty disgusting. He wanted, he wanted, hey, Chris, you wanted me to help you with that. I didn't. But he discovered that his blood count was really low. They did an endoscopy. The doctors discovered a tumor across from his duodenum. He was bleeding so bad that if they didn't do emergency surgery, he would be dead within a matter of a week. That's how bad he was bleeding out. He ended up in the hospital in Janesville for 10 days while I'm living in Milwaukee with my newborn baby, and I would have to go to the hospital to see him every day. Endured major surgery. They discovered that the tumor was very rare and cancerous. And thankfully, after much pathology and testing, they considered the surgery a complete cure. Also during this time, as if we didn't have enough going on, we started looking for our first house and bought our first house in October. So this is all from March to October.
It's like you lived like 9 lives during that time, because it's
completely
condensed and compacted, but all these life experiences. What I think is wonderful in terms of what you take from that is that, you know, first of all, you survive it, and you're still a support to your husband and to your family who's going through some losses, but you kind of figure out that life is short, and so you decide to do your true passion.
Yes, it pushed me. I'm not pretending what I went through is terrible. It just happened at a very critical point in your life, your early 20s, where you're trying to figure out who you are and what you're about and what you want to do with the rest of your life. And it pushed me through that door, and it made me question, life is short. What am I really put here for? And so one of my bucket list items had always been to write a book. I was always a voracious reader. One of my first memories is writing my mom a poem, telling her how upset I was at her. We moved and we switched schools, and I wrote her a poem telling her how evil she was.
Which one was your first book?
My first book is Fixing Forever Broken.
Okay.
And these books don't chronicle your story. They're not autobiographical.
They're completely separate. However, Kane's Justice, the one that just came out, which is a sequel to The Ugly Tree. This will be a series, so there'll be one more in the series. Does have some cleaning stories in there because after my husband became a PA, he decided to go back to medical school. And so I ran a cleaning business to support him. So I scrubbed toilets for a living for 7 years. Made for Medical School was the title of my company appropriately.
Made for Medical
And so
School.
some of the cleaning, so my character cleans houses in this book. And so they're loosely based on some of the things that I went through.
That's fantastic. What's your advice to other people who are going through some sort of crisis, whether it's in their 20s, 40s, 50s, 60s,
You know,
or beyond?
honor that crisis. Give yourself time to deal with it. But you know, sometimes one door closes, another one opens, and it forces you to think about what you really want to do with your life. And don't necessarily hate what's going on, kind of look at it in a positive light and really reflect and look at your life as a whole and decide what you're passionate about, what you want to do. And no matter what happens, keep going.
I think that's awesome advice.
You can find these books at TameraLyon.com. That's where you can find some of her reading, especially if it touched your heart and you want to read a little bit more. There's some more information there for you.
Good
Thanks so
stuff.
much for being here.
Thank you.
Great to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.